Alien mother and baby terrified of carnivorous human doctor until he saved their lives. The rain poured outside Hanbit Hospital as Dr. Taeho Kim rubbed his tired eyes and checked his watch. Only 30 minutes left on his 12-hour shift in the emergency room. The small provincial hospital rarely saw excitement beyond the occasional farming accident or weekend car crash. He sipped his lukewarm coffee and filed paperwork for his last patient, an elderly man with chest pain that turned out to be indigestion. Another quiet night, Nurse Haewon said, organizing supplies at the nearby station. Taeho nodded, about to respond when the lights flickered throughout the emergency room. Once, twice, then a strange pulsing pattern that made his skin prickle. The computer screens flashed blue before going dark. Power surge from the storm? Haewon suggested, but something about her voice wavered. The emergency room doors slid open with a hiss. Instead of the expected ambulance crew or late-night patient, a figure stood silhouetted against the flashing parking lot lights. Taeho squinted, his exhausted brain struggling to process what he was seeing. The figure stumbled forward into the light. Not human. That was Taeho's first coherent thought. The being stood about 5 feet tall with blue-gray skin that seemed to shimmer slightly under the fluorescent lights. Her body was humanoid but more slender, with oversized almond-shaped eyes that took up nearly half her face. Those eyes, deep pools of swirling indigo, locked onto Taeho with an expression he recognized instantly despite the alien features. Desperation. In her arms, she clutched a small bundle that squirmed. Weakly, "Doctor." The word came from Haewon, barely a whisper. The alien mother took another unsteady step forward, leaving small puddles of silvery liquid on the linoleum floor. Blood, Taeho realized with sudden clarity. She was injured. Before anyone could move, her legs gave out, and she collapsed to her knees, still protecting the bundle against her chest. Taeho's medical training kicked in, overriding his shock. He rushed forward, calling to Haewon, "Get a gurney!" As he approached, the alien mother's head snapped up, her large eyes widening further. Taeho stopped, hands raised in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "It's okay. I'm a doctor. I can help." His words seemed meaningless to her, but as he spoke, showing his teeth naturally, the alien made a sound like a high-pitched whistle and scrambled backward, still clutching her baby. Her reaction was unmistakable, pure terror. "What's wrong?" "I'm trying to help," Taeho said, confused. He took another step forward, and the mother pressed herself against the wall, making that same whistling sound of distress. The bundle in. Her arms moved, revealing a tiny face, a perfect miniature of the mother's but with skin a lighter shade of blue. The infant's breathing appeared labored. Haewon returned with a gurney. "Should I call security? Or, I don't even know who we should call for this." "No," Taeho said firmly. "No calls yet. She needs medical attention, and so does the baby." He tried approaching again, this time with his lips pressed together, hiding his teeth. The change was immediate. The alien mother still seemed afraid, but the extreme terror subsided. She allowed him to come within a few feet before tensing again. "The teeth," Haewon whispered behind him. "She's scared of your teeth." Taeho nodded slightly, keeping his mouth closed as he gestured toward the baby, then to himself, then to the examination room down the hall. The mother's enormous eyes darted between his face and his hands. The baby made a sound then, a weak, wheezing cry that changed everything. The mother looked down at her child, then back at Taeho. Some universal, parental instinct seemed to transcend their differences. She slowly extended her arms, offering the infant to him. Taeho gently took the alien child, acutely aware that he was probably the first human to ever hold such a being. The baby was surprisingly light, maybe 3 pounds at most, with skin that felt like cool silk beneath his fingers. Its breathing was definitely troubled. Each inhale produced a whistling sound. "We need to get them both to the private examination room at the end of the hall," Taeho instructed Haewon, "and find Dr. Jin from pediatrics if he's still in the building." As they moved slowly down the hallway, the alien mother following cautiously. Taeho noticed the hospital's security cameras turning mysteriously dark as they passed. Outside in the parking lot, he glimpsed something through the windows. A shimmering distortion in the air where nothing had been before, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. The mother saw him looking and made a soft clicking sound. When he turned to her, she pointed to the distortion, then to herself and the baby. "I think that's their ship," Taeho whispered to Haewon. "It has some kind of cloaking technology." Haewon's face was pale but determined. "What do we do now?" Taeho looked down at the struggling infant in his arms, then at the mother watching him with those enormous frightened eyes. "What we always do," he said simply. "We help them." Dr. Taeho carefully placed the alien infant on the examination table, watching as its tiny chest struggled with each breath. The baby's skin had darkened slightly from its original pale blue to a concerning lavender shade. In the corner of the room, the mother stood rigid, her large eyes never leaving her child. Every time someone's lips parted enough to show teeth, she made that same high-pitched whistling sound of distress. "We need to figure out how to communicate," Taeho said to Haewon, keeping his voice low and his lips closed as much as possible. "And quickly. The baby's condition seems to be getting worse." Dr. Jin arrived moments later, stopping short at the doorway, his medical textbook falling from his hands when he saw their patients. After a hurried explanation from Taeho, he joined them, careful to keep his mouth mostly closed when facing the mother. "This is beyond anything I've studied," Jin whispered, examining the infant from a respectful distance. "But whatever they are, they need air to breathe, and this little one is struggling with ours." Nurse Sujin arrived with basic medical supplies and a small whiteboard she'd grabbed from the nurse's station. "Maybe we can try drawing," she suggested. Taeho nodded and took the whiteboard. He sketched a simple stick figure with a smiling face, then pointed to himself. The alien mother tilted her head, studying the drawing with intense concentration. Then, to everyone's surprise, she reached for the marker. Her slender fingers moved swiftly across the board, creating a detailed drawing of a humanoid figure with sharp teeth biting into something that looked disturbingly like one of her kind. She pointed to Taeho's teeth, then to the drawing, making a sound like rustling leaves. "She thinks we're predators," Haewon said softly. "Look at how she drew the teeth, like carnivores." Taeho frowned, careful not to show his teeth. He erased the drawing and made a new one, a simple picture of a human helping another human with a medical cross nearby. He pointed to himself again, then to the drawing, then made an exaggerated gentle patting motion on his own arm. The mother watched, her head tilting again. She seemed less certain now, her large eyes blinking slowly as she processed this new information. A weak cry from the baby drew everyone's attention. The infant's color had darkened further, now an alarming purple-blue. "We need oxygen now," Jin said, moving toward the supply cabinet. The sudden movement startled the mother, who made a clicking sound and rushed to her child's side, placing herself between the doctors and her baby. Taeho held up his hands and slowly approached the whiteboard again. This time, he drew a simple diagram of lungs, then air flowing into them. He pointed to the baby, mimicked troubled breathing, then drew oxygen flowing into the lungs again, followed by a smiling, healthy-looking figure. The mother stared at the drawing for a long moment. Then, in a gesture that surprised everyone, she touched her own chest, opening a previously invisible seam in what they had assumed was skin but now appeared to be some kind of bodysuit. Underneath was a slightly different shade of blue-gray skin with faint ridges along what would be the rib cage on a human. She pointed to these ridges, then to the baby. "Breathing structures," Jin whispered. "She's showing us their respiratory system." Taeho nodded and drew again, this time simple pictures showing the differences between human lungs and what the mother had just revealed about her species' breathing organs. The baby made another weak sound, and the mother's composure broke. She made urgent gestures toward her child, her movements becoming frantic. She grabbed the marker and drew what looked like air flowing into her species' breathing ridges, but with jagged lines crossing through it. "Something in our air is hurting them," Sujin realized aloud. The baby's condition was deteriorating rapidly. Its tiny chest heaved with effort, the purple tinge spreading across its body. In desperation, Taeho pulled out his phone and opened a translation app. He knew it wouldn't have her language, but he had another idea. He typed quickly and showed her the screen with different language options displayed, pointing from one to another with a questioning look. The mother stared at the screen, then slowly reached out with one slender finger and touched it. The screen responded to her touch, scrolling through languages. She wasn't understanding his intent, but at least she was engaging. Dr. Jin had returned with an oxygen mask and tank. He approached slowly, showing the equipment to the mother first. She recoiled slightly but didn't make the warning whistle. Taeho had another idea. He pulled up the periodic table on his phone and pointed to oxygen, then to the air, then made breathing motions. Then he pointed to the other elements, particularly nitrogen, which made up most of Earth's atmosphere, and made a crossing-out gesture followed by pointing to the baby and shaking his head. Something sparked in those large alien eyes. The mother looked from the phone to her baby, then to the oxygen tank. Slowly, she nodded. Jin moved forward with the mask, but as he got closer, he automatically gave a reassuring smile. The mother immediately tensed, making that warning whistle again. No. Teeth, Taeho reminded him. She thinks we're showing aggression or hunger when we expose our teeth. Jin quickly pressed his lips together and nodded. He approached again, this time with his mouth firmly closed, and gently placed the mask near the baby. The mother watched, with obvious anxiety, but didn't interfere. As the oxygen began flowing, the baby's color improved slightly, from deep purple back to the concerning lavender. It wasn't enough, but it was something. We need to understand more, Taeho said, turning back to the whiteboard. Whatever is wrong, basic oxygen helps but doesn't solve it. He drew a question mark, then the Earth, then the alien mother and child with a sad face. He was trying to ask why they had come here, what had happened. The mother seemed to understand. With trembling hands, she took the marker and began to create a detailed drawing of what was unmistakably a spacecraft, damaged, in one section, with a trajectory line showing it heading toward a planet that could only be Earth. They crashed, Haewon whispered. They didn't mean to come here at all. The baby's breathing faltered again, the oxygen mask seeming to lose effectiveness. The mother made a keening sound that needed no translation, the universal cry of a parent watching their child suffer. The hospital hallway clock ticked past 3 a.m. as Taeho hunched over medical reference books and his laptop. His eyes burned from exhaustion, but the image of the suffering alien infant kept him alert. The baby's condition had stabilized temporarily with oxygen, but its breathing remained labored, and the alarming purple color continued to spread across its delicate skin. Coffee? Haewon appeared beside him, holding out a steaming cup. Her hair had come loose from its neat bun, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. Thanks, Taeho said, accepting the cup gratefully. Any change? She shook her head. The oxygen concentration is helping, but Dr. Jin thinks it's not addressing the root problem. The baby's vital signs, what we can interpret of them anyway, keep fluctuating. They had moved mother and child to a rarely used storage room converted into a makeshift treatment area, away from curious eyes and potential discovery. Only 5 staff members knew about their unusual patients. Taeho, Haewon, Jin from pediatrics, Sujin, and Minho, the night security guard who'd helped them avoid the hospital's surveillance cameras. What about the mother? Taeho asked, taking a sip of coffee. Still awake. She won't sleep. Just watches her baby and draws. Haewon pulled out several sheets of paper covered with intricate drawings. She's incredibly detailed. Look at these. I think she's trying to explain their biology. Taeho spread the drawings across the desk. One showed the internal structure of what appeared to be their respiratory system, similar to human lungs but with branching chambers and those distinctive external ridges. Another drawing depicted chemical symbols that weren't quite Earth elements but suggested compounds of some kind. She's remarkably intelligent, Taeho murmured, studying the drawings. She's trying to give us their medical information using universal concepts like chemistry. I still can't believe this is happening, Haewon said, shaking her head. Actual aliens here in our little hospital. I'm more concerned about what happens if people find out, Teho replied. The government, military, media, it would be chaos. Minho poked his head into the room. Doctor, you should come. The baby's color is changing again. They hurried to the makeshift treatment room. Inside, the alien mother stood by the small medical bed where her child lay. The infant's skin had darkened to an alarming deep purple, almost black in places. The mother made soft clicking sounds as she stroked her child's head. Dr. Jin looked up from the monitoring equipment they'd cobbled. Together, the oxygen isn't enough anymore. Something else in our atmosphere must be affecting them. Teho approached the mother, careful to keep his lips pressed together. He pointed to her, then to the window where dawn was breaking, raising his eyebrows. In question, the mother seemed to understand. She reached for the whiteboard and drew what looked like their ship, then the Earth's atmosphere as layered lines. She pointed to one particular layer and made a slashing motion across her throat. Something in our upper atmosphere damaged their ship, Teho interpreted. But what? The mother drew again, this time the chemical composition of Earth's atmosphere, as she understood it. She circled the nitrogen symbol prominently, then drew her baby with jagged lines coming from its breathing ridges. Nitrogen, Sujin said suddenly. It's the nitrogen. Their species must come from a planet with different atmospheric composition. That makes sense, Jin nodded. Nitrogen makes up 78% of our atmosphere. If their world has little or none of it, exposure could be toxic to them. The baby made a weak whistling sound, its tiny chest barely moving now. The mother made that keening cry again, pressing her slender hand against the infant's face. We need to create a nitrogen-free environment, Teho said urgently. Now. How? Heiwan asked. We don't have equipment for that. Teho thought for a moment. The hyperbaric oxygen chamber in the basement. It's small, but we could modify it. That chamber is pure oxygen, Jin objected. It would be just as dangerous in different ways. Yes, but the engineering is there, Teho insisted. We could adjust it to filter out nitrogen but not replace it entirely with oxygen, maybe substitute with helium or argon. He turned to Minho. Can you get Professor Young from the chemistry department at the university? Don't tell him why, just that it's an emergency. Minho nodded and rushed out. The mother watched them with those enormous eyes, seeming to sense their urgency. She made a soft trilling sound and approached Teho, reaching out to touch his forehead with her cool fingers. The touch sent a strange tingling sensation through his skin. An image flashed in his mind, a world with purple skies and strange crystalline vegetation. The air shimmered with particles that danced like fireflies. He felt an overwhelming sense of home, of belonging, followed by crushing fear and the desperate need to protect. Teho gasped as she withdrew her hand. Did you feel that? He asked the others, but they were staring at him in confusion. Feel what? Sujin asked. She showed me something. Their world. He turned to the mother. Was that telepathy? Can you communicate that way? The mother tilted her head, seeming to consider, then placed her hand on the baby's forehead. Her face contorted with what could only be described as pain, and she pulled away quickly. The baby's too weak to mentally connect, Teho realized. That's why she's been drawing instead. Professor Young arrived 40 minutes later, his eyes widening behind thick glasses when Teho explained their unusual patience. To his credit, the chemistry professor recovered quickly and focused on the problem. Filtering nitrogen is possible, he confirmed after examining the hyperbaric chamber. We can create a mixture of oxygen, helium, and traces of other gases that should be non-toxic, but we'll need equipment from my lab. Whatever you need, Teho said. Hours blurred together as they worked. The baby's condition continued to deteriorate despite their best efforts with conventional treatments. The mother rarely left her child's side, but twice she ventured to the window to stare at the spot in the parking lot where her cloaked ship presumably stood. Is she thinking of trying to leave? Heiwan asked quietly. I don't think their ship is functional, Teho replied. From her drawings, It seems the propulsion system was damaged. They're stranded here. By afternoon, they had converted the hyperbaric chamber into what Professor Young called an alien-friendly atmosphere generator. It looked like a patchwork of medical equipment, chemistry lab apparatus, and parts scavenged from around the hospital. It should work, Young said, wiping sweat from his brow. The mixture is approximately 20% oxygen, 70% helium, with traces of argon and carbon dioxide. No nitrogen. The challenge now was explaining this to the mother. Tae-ho approached her with drawings showing the chamber, how it would filter out the nitrogen and how her baby would be placed inside. The mother studied the drawings intently, occasionally glancing at her struggling infant. "We need to test it first," Jin warned. "We have no idea how their physiology will react." "There's no time," Tae-ho said, watching the baby's labored breathing. "Look at the color. It's spreading to the core body now." The mother made a decisive clicking sound and lifted her baby into her arms. She walked directly to the chamber and looked at Tae-ho with something that transcended language, trust mixed with desperate hope. "She wants us to try," Tae-ho said softly. "She knows there's no other option." The team gathered around as Jin carefully explained the procedure using gestures and drawings. The mother would need to place her baby in the chamber, and they would seal it and begin filtering the atmosphere. It would take several minutes for the nitrogen to be fully removed. As they made the final preparations, the baby's breathing became increasingly labored, with long pauses between each weak inhale. The mother made a soft, musical sound, singing, Tae-ho realized. A lullaby from another world. The modified hyperbaric chamber hummed softly as Professor Young adjusted the gas mixture flowing into it. Through the clear viewing panel, the alien infant lay motionless except for the occasional weak rise and fall of its tiny chest. Its skin had darkened to an alarming deep violet, almost black around the edges of its face and limbs. Nitrogen levels, at 8% and falling, Young reported, his voice tight with concentration. Oxygen stable at 20%, helium replacing the nitrogen. The alien mother pressed her slender hands against the chamber's viewing panel, making soft clicking, sounds that needed no translation, a parent's desperate plea for their child to hold on. Her enormous eyes reflected the chamber's blinking lights, giving them an otherworldly shimmer. Tae-ho checked the crude monitoring equipment they'd attached to the baby. "Heart rate is erratic," he said, keeping his voice calm despite his growing concern. "Body temperature dropping. We might be too late," Jin whispered, careful to keep his teeth hidden as the mother glanced his way. Soo-jin placed a gentle hand on the mother's shoulder. "Don't give up," she said, knowing the words wouldn't be understood but hoping the sentiment might carry. The mother turned to look at Soo-jin, then back at her child. She made a series of rapid clicks and whistles, then suddenly placed her palm against Tae-ho's forehead again. The connection was stronger this time, images flooding his mind in a disorienting rush. Their homeworld with its purple skies, the mother and baby in some kind of vessel, warning signals and flashing lights, fear, a desperate escape, the baby healthy, then suddenly struggling to breathe as they entered Earth's atmosphere. A crash, landing. The mother's knowledge that Earth had oxygen their species could use, but something else in the air was poisoning her child. When she pulled her hand away, Tae-ho staggered slightly, overwhelmed by the intensity of the connection. "She's showing me their journey," he explained to the others. They weren't exploring, they were fleeing something. An accident or attack damaged their ship and they had no choice but to land here. "Nitrogen down to 4%, Young announced, adjusting another dial. "The chamber's almost ready." Minutes crawled by like hours as they watched the infant's condition. The monitors showed no improvement, and for a terrible moment, Tae-ho feared they had acted too late. The mother made a keening sound, her large eyes fixed unblinkingly on her child. Then, so subtle they almost missed it, the baby's dark purple skin lightened a shade. The change spread slowly from the core of its tiny body outward. "Look," Hae-won pointed excitedly. "The color's changing back." Young checked his instruments. Nitrogen now at less than 1%. The chamber is working. The infant moved slightly, one small hand flexing and unflexing. Its chest began to rise and fall more regularly, each breath appearing less labored than the one before. The mother made a sound none of them had heard before, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Her posture relaxed visibly, though she kept her hands pressed against the chamber's viewing panel. "I think that's their equivalent of relief or happiness," Jin observed, smiling before quickly pressing his lips together when the mother glanced his way. Over the next hour, the improvement continued steadily. The baby's color shifted from dark purple to lavender and finally to a healthy pale blue. Its breathing normalized and the monitors showed stronger vital signs. The infant even opened its eyes briefly, enormous like its mother's but a lighter shade of indigo. "We did it," Taeho said, the realization washing over him like a wave. "We actually saved an alien child." The mother turned to look at him, making that wind chime sound again. Then, to everyone's surprise, she carefully formed her mouth into what could only be described as an attempt at a human smile. Lips pressed, together corners turned up, no teeth showing. Taeho laughed from sheer joy and relief, forgetting himself and showing his teeth in a broad grin. The mother flinched instinctively but didn't retreat. Instead, she tilted her head, studying his expression with newfound curiosity rather than fear. An idea struck Taeho. He picked up the whiteboard and drew a human face with a smile showing teeth, then drew an arrow to a picture of helping hands. Next, he drew a human face with bared teeth and an angry expression, with an arrow pointing to a predator image. He pointed back and forth between the drawings, then to his own smile, trying to explain the difference. The mother studied the drawings, then slowly reached out and traced the smiling face with one slender finger. She made a soft trilling sound and gestured to Taeho's mouth, then pointed to her child and made the wind chime sound again. "I think she's beginning to understand that our teeth aren't always a threat," Sujin said softly. "That sometimes they're part of expressing happiness or relief." "Cultural misunderstanding," Young mused, adjusting his glasses. On their world, showing teeth must only be aggressive or predatory. They had no concept of smiling as a friendly gesture. The baby made a soft cooing sound from inside the chamber, drawing everyone's attention back. Its color had stabilized at a healthy blue, and its breathing was normal. The tiny chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm, and its small hands occasionally moved in what appeared to be normal infant reflexes. "We should be able to reduce the helium concentration gradually," Young said, "and increase oxygen slightly. See how it tolerates the change." "How long will the baby need to stay in the chamber?" Haewon asked. Jin shook his head. "Hard to say. We're in uncharted territory here. But I'd guess at least until we're certain it can process some level of nitrogen, or until they can repair their ship." The mother made a series of clicking sounds and gestured urgently to the whiteboard. When Taeho handed it to her, she drew their ship, then circled the damaged section with several question marks around it. "She wants to know if we can help repair their ship," Taeho translated. Young studied the drawing with interest. "I'd need to see it first. And we'd need materials that might not exist on Earth." The mother seemed to understand the uncertainty in his voice. She drew again, this time a simple picture of the sun rising and setting multiple times. Then she drew her baby growing slightly larger. "She's asking how long they'll need to stay," Sujin realized. "She's trying to make plans." Taeho felt a wave of compassion wash over him. This mother so far from home, trying to protect her child in an environment that was literally toxic to them. Yet here she was, communicating across the boundaries of species and language, placing trust in complete strangers because she had no other choice. He took the marker and drew several suns rising and setting, then the baby growing healthier, followed by a question mark. He was trying to ask how long it would take for the baby to recover enough to travel. The mother studied his drawing, then carefully drew what appeared to be a lunar cycle, a moon changing phases. She pointed to it, then to her child. "A month," Jin interpreted. "She thinks the baby needs about a month to recover fully." Taeho nodded and drew their small group of humans around the mother and baby, with simple homes in the hospital. He was trying to convey that they could stay, that they would help. The mother looked at the drawing for a long moment. Then, in a gesture that transcended all language barriers, she placed her hand over her heart, then touched Taeho's chest lightly, making the soft wind chime sound. "I think that's her way of saying thank you," Haewon whispered, blinking back tears. The baby made another soft sound from inside the chamber, its tiny hands reaching upward. For the first time since they arrived, the infant's movements seemed strong and purposeful. Its color remained a healthy blue with no traces of the alarming purple. "I'd call that a successful treatment," Taeho said, unable to keep the smile of relief from his face. This time, when the mother saw his teeth, she didn't flinch at all. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the hospital room window as Taeho checked the readings on the modified chamber. 2 weeks had passed since they'd first created the nitrogen-free environment for the alien infant, and the improvement had been remarkable. The baby now spent only a few hours each day in the chamber, gradually adapting to short periods in Earth's atmosphere. "Look at this," Taeho said to Haewon, who was arranging fresh blankets nearby. "Tolerance levels are up another 5% since yesterday." The baby lay on a small bed, its skin now a vibrant teal blue that seemed to shimmer slightly. Under the lights, it was awake, enormous indigo eyes tracking the movements of a small mobile that Sujin had crafted from paper and string. Tiny, six-fingered hands reached upward, making delicate, grasping motions. "It's hard to believe how sick it was just 2 weeks ago," Haewon replied, smiling at the infant. "The recovery rate is astonishing." The door opened and the alien mother entered, carrying a tray of fruit that the hospital kitchen had provided. Over the past fortnight, they had discovered that certain earth fruits, particularly berries and citrus, were compatible with the aliens' digestive systems. The mother had taken to bringing fresh food whenever she returned from her brief excursions outside. Those excursions had been a source of concern at first, but the mother had proved remarkably adept at blending in. She wore clothes borrowed from Sujin, loose-fitting hoodies and pants that concealed her slender, non-human proportions. Large sunglasses hid her oversized eyes, and a surgical mask covered the lower portion of her face, a common enough sight in this part of the world that it drew no attention. "Good afternoon," Taeho greeted her, no longer hiding his smile. Through consistent exposure and patient explanation, the mother had come to understand that human teeth-baring was a sign of friendship, not aggression. She responded with her own species greeting, a soft, trilling sound accompanied by a slight bow of her head. She set down the fruit and immediately went to her baby, making the wind chime sound that they now recognized as her expression of joy. The infant responded with a similar higher-pitched version of the same sound. "The little one's nitrogen tolerance is still improving," Taeho explained, using the simple phrases and hand gestures they had developed for communication. He pointed to the monitoring equipment, then to the air, making a thumbs-up sign. The mother nodded her understanding. She had proven to be incredibly intelligent, picking up basic Korean words and phrases at a remarkable rate. Similarly, the humans had begun to recognize patterns in her clicks, trills, and whistles, creating a rudimentary shared language. She reached for the whiteboard that had become their primary communication tool and drew a quick sketch of the hospital, then herself and the baby outside its walls with question marks around them. "She wants to know when they can leave the hospital," Haewon interpreted. Taeho considered the question carefully. The baby was recovering well, but still needed regular time in the nitrogen-free chamber. However, keeping them hidden in the hospital was becoming increasingly difficult. Several staff members had grown curious about the restricted storage room, and the hospital administrator had started asking questions about the unusual power consumption. "I might have a solution," Professor Young said from the doorway where he had been quietly observing. "I've converted an old vacuum chamber in my lab into a portable nitrogen filter. It's not as efficient as this setup, but it should work for a few hours at a time." He entered the room carrying what looked like a modified oxygen tank attached to a small mask. "This pulls in air, filters out most of the nitrogen, and provides a safe breathing mixture. It's not perfect, but it should allow them more mobility outside the hospital." The mother watched with those enormous intelligent eyes as Young demonstrated the device. She reached for it cautiously, examining the filter mechanism with evident understanding. "I've also been working on something else," Young continued, pulling out a small electronic device. "Based on the designs she showed us of their ship's atmospheric systems, I've created a prototype repair part. It might help them fix their propulsion system." Taeho felt a strange mix of emotions at the news. Relief that they might help the aliens return home, but also a surprising sadness at the thought of their departure. Over the weeks, the small team had grown attached to the mother and child, finding connection despite their profound differences. The mother seemed to sense his conflicted feelings. She approached and gently placed her hand on his forehead, the telepathic touch they had come to know. Images flowed between them, her gratitude, warm and overwhelming, her home planet with its purple skies and crystalline forests, her people, peaceful, curious beings who studied the stars, and finally, a sense of invitation and welcome. When she withdrew her hand, Taeho blinked rapidly, processing the emotional exchange. "She showed me her home," he explained to the others. I think she was saying we would be welcome there someday." The mother nodded, then picked up the whiteboard again. With remarkable detail, she drew a star map, placing a small mark on one particular star. She then drew Earth's solar system, creating a clear path between the two. "She's showing us where they come from," Young said in awe, quickly copying the star map. "This is incredible astronomical data." That evening, they moved the mother and child to Professor Young's laboratory at the university. It was quieter there, with fewer people to ask questions, and Young could continue working on repairs for their ship. The converted vacuum chamber worked well as a temporary breathing apparatus for the baby, allowing it to spend longer periods outside the hospital's specialized environment. 3 more weeks passed. The baby grew stronger daily, its skin taking on a deeper teal hue that the mother indicated was a sign of excellent health. Its tolerance for Earth's atmosphere improved to the point where it only needed the filtering device for sleeping. The mother continued her careful excursions, always returning with new observations about human culture that she shared through drawings and increasingly complex hand signals. During this time, Professor Young made several nighttime visits to the cloaked ship, guided by the mother. Using her knowledge and his engineering skills, they slowly repaired the damaged propulsion system with Earth materials modified to approximate their alien equivalents. "It won't be able to reach light speed again," he explained to Taeho after one such session, "but it should be sufficient for them to reach their relay station near Saturn. They apparently have a larger vessel waiting there." The news brought that same bittersweet feeling to Taeho. He had grown used to their daily visits, to the baby's curious trills when he entered the room, to the mother's increasingly accurate attempts at human smiles. On what would be their final evening on Earth, they gathered in Young's laboratory, Taeho, Haiwan, Jin, Sujin, Minho, and Professor Young, to say goodbye. The mother had prepared a small pouch for each of them, containing what appeared to be crystalline objects in various colors. "What are these?" Sujin asked, holding up a purple crystal that seemed to glow faintly from within. The mother touched her forehead, then the crystal, making a circular motion with her hand. "Memory stones," Taeho guessed. "I think they record experiences or thoughts." The mother nodded, pleased at his understanding. She demonstrated by touching one crystal to her forehead, then handing it to Taeho. When he held it, he felt then saw impressions of his own actions through her eyes. His first careful examination of her baby, his breakthrough with the nitrogen-free chamber, his patient attempts to communicate across the species barrier. The overwhelming emotion attached to these images was gratitude. "Thank you," he said simply, the words inadequate for what he felt. The mother made the wind chime sound, then surprised them all by speaking her first distinct Korean word, "friend." There were tears as they said their final goodbyes. The mother touched each of their foreheads one last time, sharing a final telepathic message, different for each person, private and personal. To Taeho, she showed a vision of stars with pathways connecting them, and a sense that someday their peoples might meet again under better circumstances. Shortly after midnight, they accompanied the mother and baby to a clearing in the forest, behind the university. The air was cool and still, the stars brilliant overhead. The mother activated some device on her wrist, and suddenly the cloaked ship appeared before them, sleek and silvery, roughly the size of a small bus, with no visible seams or joints in its smooth surface. A door appeared in its side, opening, silently. The mother stood at the entrance, the baby secure in a carrier against her chest. She made the wind chime sound one final time, then placed her hand over her heart, and touched it to her forehead, in what they had come to understand was a gesture of deep respect. Then, silently, the door closed. The ship shimmered slightly, rose a few meters off the ground with only the faintest hum, and shot upward into the night sky. Within seconds, it was indistinguishable from the stars above. "Do you think we'll ever see them again?" Haywan asked, softly. Taeho looked down at the crystal in his hand, now glowing with a gentle blue light. "I hope so," he said. "I really hope so." In his pocket was the final thing the mother had given him, a small drawing showing Earth and her planet connected by a dotted line, with simplified figures holding hands across the stars. A promise, perhaps, or simply a hope that boundaries, between worlds like the misunderstanding about smiling teeth, could someday be overcome.